The first hint of dawn was just beginning to streak the sky when a small figure emerged from the shadows of an old derelict barn. Ethan, just 6 years old, scrubbed at his sleep-filled eyes, shifting the weight of a battered backpack on his slender frame. At his side, Buddy, a scruffy mutt of indeterminate breed, wagged his tail in loyal silence. The boy's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the magnificent Smith estate rose like a fortress against the pale pink canvas of morning. His eyes, disproportionately large in his gaunt, pale face, held a familiar blend of longing and weary acceptance. With a sigh so faint it was nearly lost to the air, he turned and started his daily trek. Ethan moved with a light, practiced quietness, a skill honed by years of trying to remain invisible. His bare feet were calloused and tough, knowing every stone and root along the well-worn path. Buddy trotted close, occasionally darting ahead to investigate an intriguing scent, but always circling back to the boy's side. Upon reaching the edge of the quiet Connecticut road, Ethan paused, his eyes expertly scanning the asphalt for the telltale shine of aluminum or the rustle of discarded paper. With a swift, cat-like movement, he dropped to the shoulder of the road and began his work. His small, calloused hands moved with speed and precision, snatching up crushed cans and pieces of cardboard. Each find was inspected with a critical eye before being deposited into his backpack. Ethan knew precisely what had value and what was merely trash. As he worked, his thoughts drifted back to a time, not so long ago, when his hands were soft, when they held not dented cans, but the warm, gentle fingers of his mother, Claire. "Ethan, my little one," Claire's voice was a soft echo in his memory. "Always remember that you are stronger than you think and smarter than you believe." The boy gave his head a sharp shake, pushing the memory down. There was no time for that. The sun was climbing higher, and he needed to finish his route before the day's heat became oppressive. Hours slipped by, and Ethan's backpack grew steadily heavier. Buddy, ever vigilant, would let out a sharp bark to warn him of the rare car that sped too close. Ethan would offer a grateful smile to his steadfast companion, sharing a piece of stale bread he'd saved from the day before. When the sun reached its zenith, Ethan knew it was time to head back. His stomach rumbled with a familiar ache, but he had long ago mastered the art of ignoring it. On the return journey, they passed the grand entrance to the Smith estate. Ethan paused for a moment, his eyes tracing the long, winding driveway that led to the mansion. He saw a sleek, luxurious car departing through the iron gates and quickly ducked behind a large oak tree. From his concealed vantage point, Ethan watched a man in an expensive suit climb out of the car, his face a mask of concentration as he spoke into his phone. It was John Smith, the master of the entire estate. Ethan observed him with a mix of awe and trepidation. As the man strode into the house, Ethan's gaze was drawn to a second-floor window. A little girl, perhaps his own age, was staring out with a look of profound sadness. For a fleeting instant, their eyes met across the distance, and Ethan felt a strange, inexplicable pull. Shaking his head to dispel the thought, Ethan continued on his way. There was no room for daydreams in his world. He had to survive. Back inside the barn, Ethan meticulously organized his haul for the day. He sorted the cans, stacked the cardboard, and set aside anything that might prove useful. His eyes were sharp with focus, his hands moving with a proficiency that belied his young age. Buddy curled up in a corner, watching Ethan with devoted eyes. The boy smiled at his furry friend, thankful for the silent companionship. After finishing, Ethan pulled a tattered newspaper clipping from his backpack. He perched on a bale of hay and began to read, his lips moving silently as he sounded out the words. "Look, Ethan," his mother's voice resurfaced in his memory. "Each word is a window to a new world. Never stop learning, my love." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, fighting the sting of tears. Crying was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had to be strong. As the afternoon waned, Ethan set out again, this time to sell his collection. He knew the local recycling centers where he could exchange his cans and cardboard for a few coins. Every penny was precious, tucked away in a small cloth pouch hidden deep within his backpack. On his way back, he passed a local bakery, and the aroma of freshly baked bread made his stomach clench with a painful longing. For a moment, Ethan considered spending a few of his hard-earned coins, but he quickly dismissed the thought. He had to save every cent. Instead, Ethan made his way to a small, clear brook that ran along the backside of the Smith property. Here, far from any prying eyes, he and Buddy could drink the cool, fresh water. Ethan washed the day's grime from his face and hands, watching it swirl away in the current. While he was drying his hands on his threadbare shirt, Ethan heard approaching voices. He and Buddy quickly took cover behind a thicket of bushes. Two groundskeepers ambled by, deep in conversation. "Did you hear little Lily is sick again?" said one of them. "Poor thing," replied the other. "They say it's asthma. Mr. Smith has been worried sick." Ethan frowned, the image of the sad little girl in the window flashing in his mind. A knot tightened in his chest at the thought of her being ill and alone in that vast house. Once the men had passed, Ethan emerged from his hiding place, a thoughtful expression on his face. He glanced toward the mansion, then down at Buddy, who looked up at him with knowing eyes. "Come on, Buddy," Ethan said softly. "It's getting late." The pair returned to the barn just as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ethan built a small, carefully contained fire, just enough to provide a little warmth without attracting attention. He shared his meager supper with Buddy, another piece of stale bread and a few scraps he'd found. Before settling down to sleep, Ethan retrieved a small, well-worn book from his backpack, the only one he owned, a final gift from his mother. By the fire's faint light, he read a few pages, his eyes shining with a deep fascination for the stories and knowledge held within its pages. Finally, with the book tucked safely away, Ethan burrowed into the hay. Buddy curled up at his side, a warm, living comfort. He looked up at the barn's dilapidated roof, where a few stars twinkled through the gaps in the wood. "Good night, Mom," he whispered into the starry expanse, a single tear finally escaping as sleep overtook him. And so another day concluded in the life of young Ethan, a boy who, despite his tender age, bore the weight of the world on his small shoulders, a boy who was, unknown to him, on the verge of changing not only his own destiny, but the destiny of everyone in the grand house on the hill. The morning sun streamed through the fine silk curtains of Lily's room, illuminating the golden curls splayed across her pillow. The 4-year-old girl opened her eyes slowly, her small chest rising and falling with a strained, uneven rhythm. Beside her bed, an inhaler sat on the nightstand, a constant and unwelcome fixture in her life. Lily pushed herself up, her blue eyes surveying the cavernous bedroom, which was filled with pristine, untouched toys. Porcelain dolls stared back at her with vacant, glassy eyes from shelves set too high for her to reach. An elaborate electric train set, a gift from her last birthday, remained sealed in its box. "Miss Lily," came the gentle voice of Martha, the housekeeper, from the other side of the door. "It's time to get up, dear." The door swung open to reveal Martha, a kind-faced, middle-aged woman with a warm smile. She crossed to the bed and helped Lily to her feet. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" Martha asked, her hand resting gently on the girl's forehead. Lily just shrugged, a gesture far too weary for her 4 years. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, her small voice brimming with a familiar, fading hope. Martha's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Your father had to leave early for an important meeting, dear, but I'm sure he'll come see you later." Lily nodded, a practiced response to a familiar answer. As Martha helped her dress, the little girl gazed out the window, watching the estate staff begin their daily chores. Her eyes lingered on a family walking along the distant road, a father, a mother, and 2 children, all laughing and playing. After a breakfast that Lily barely touched, Martha led her out to the garden. The crisp morning air made the girl cough, and Martha instinctively reached for the inhaler. "Just in case," she said with an encouraging smile, helping Lily take a puff. Lily sat on an ornate wrought-iron bench, watching butterflies flit between the vibrant flowers. Martha kept a watchful eye on her while watering some nearby roses. "Martha," Lily called out after a long silence, "why can't I go to school like the other children?" The housekeeper came and sat beside her. "Oh, darling, you know your health is so delicate. Your father just wants to make sure you're safe and well cared for right here at home." Lily's brow furrowed, her small hands clenching in her lap. "But I feel lonely," she whispered. Martha pulled the girl into a hug, her own heart aching at the sadness in that tiny voice. "I know, my dear. How about we go read a story together? You can pick any book you want." As they walked back toward the house, Lily paused, her eyes fixed on something just beyond the estate's tall fence. For a split second, she thought she saw a boy and a dog watching her, but when she blinked, they were gone. In the afternoon, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway sent a jolt of excitement through Lily. She scrambled to the window to see her father, John Smith, getting out of his sleek black car. "Daddy!" she cried, rushing down the grand staircase, ignoring Martha's gentle warnings not to overexert herself. John entered the house, a phone pressed firmly to his ear. He raised a hand in a distracted wave toward Lily, his attention still consumed by his call as he strode toward his office. No, the numbers aren't good enough. We need to review the entire strategy." His voice faded as the heavy office door clicked shut behind him. Lily stood frozen in the middle of the vast foyer, her small hands balled into fists, unshed tears shimmering in her eyes. Martha came over, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Come, dear, how about we make a special snack? Perhaps your father can join us later." The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Lily sat in the living room, aimlessly flipping through a picture book, her gaze repeatedly drifting to the closed office door, willing it to open. Finally, as evening began to settle, John emerged from his sanctuary. He looked exhausted, worry lines etched deep into his brow. "Lily," he said, finally noticing his daughter, "you're still awake." The girl ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. John hesitated for a moment before patting her hair in a slightly awkward gesture. "How are you feeling? Any trouble breathing today?" he asked, his tone a mixture of genuine concern and remote distraction. Lily shook her head. "I'm fine, Daddy. Would you like to see the drawing I made?" John glanced at his watch and frowned. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. I still have a lot of work to do. Be a good girl and go to bed, okay?" Before Lily could protest, his phone rang again. With a sigh, he answered it and turned back toward his office. Lily watched the door close once more, her small frame seeming to shrink. Martha appeared, gently guiding her upstairs. "Come along. It's time for your bath and to get ready for bed." Later, lying in her enormous bed, Lily gazed out the window. The full moon illuminated the garden, casting long, dancing shadows. For a moment, she thought she saw the boy and the dog again, this time near the old barn at the edge of the property. Lily blinked, and the image vanished. It was probably just her imagination, conjuring the friends she so desperately wanted. With a sigh, she rolled over, hugging her favorite teddy bear. "Good night, Mommy," she whispered to the elegant portrait on her nightstand. A beautiful woman with the same golden hair as Lily, smiling a radiant, frozen smile. Outside, concealed by the shadows of the barn, Ethan watched the single-lit window. He didn't know why he felt such a strong connection to that lonely girl, so different from him, and yet, in some strange way, so familiar. Buddy whined softly beside him, and Ethan patted the dog's head. "Come on, Buddy," he murmured. "It's time to sleep." As the two retreated into their makeshift shelter, Ethan cast one final look at the mansion. For a brief moment, two solitary souls, one surrounded by immense wealth, the other by stark poverty, were connected by a shared, unspoken longing for the simple human need for friendship. The dusk sky was a bruised palette of orange and purple as the day's heat slowly dissipated. The Smith mansion stood silhouetted against the horizon, its windows like vacant eyes reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight. A deceptive tranquility settled over the grounds, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Inside the house, Martha moved with quiet efficiency, preparing Lily's dinner. The little girl was in the living room, quietly arranging her dolls, though her eyes kept darting toward her father's closed office door. "Lily, dear," Martha called, placing a steaming bowl of soup on the dining table. "Come have your dinner." The little girl approached the table, her blue eyes scanning the empty chair beside her own. "Daddy's not having dinner with me again today?" Martha sighed, stroking the child's golden hair. "Your father is very busy, my love. He has an important meeting tonight." As if on cue, the office door swung open, and John Smith emerged, adjusting the knot of his tie. He barely glanced at his daughter as he hurried toward the front door. "Martha, I'm going into the city. I have a dinner with some investors." "Don't wait up," he said, his hand already on the doorknob. "Daddy," Lily's small voice stopped him in his tracks. "Can you give me a good-night kiss when you get back?" John hesitated, a flicker of something akin to guilt crossing his features as he finally looked at his daughter. "Sure, Princess. Now be a good girl and do what Martha says, okay?" Before Lily could reply, he was gone, the sound of his car's engine shattering the evening's quiet. Martha saw the familiar look of disappointment on Lily's face. "Come, dear, let's eat, and then we can read a story before bed." The hours crept by. Lily played for a while longer, took her bath, and listened as Martha read to her. Finally, with the girl tucked into her bed, Martha glanced at the clock. "Lily, I need to run into town for some last-minute shopping. Will you be okay on your own for a bit? I promise I won't be long." Lily nodded bravely, though a hint of fear shadowed her eyes. "I'll be fine, Martha. I'm a big girl now." Martha smiled, leaning down to kiss the child's forehead. "That's right. Sleep well, my angel. I'll be back before you know it." With a final glance at Lily, Martha left, closing the door softly behind her. The ensuing silence was heavy and absolute. Lily burrowed under her covers, clutching her teddy bear. Outside, the wind had picked up, making the trees whisper and creak in an unsettling chorus. Meanwhile, at the edge of the property, Ethan was pacing restlessly. The unseasonable warmth had made the old barn feel stifling, so he and Buddy had ventured out for some fresh air. The boy glanced up at the mansion, noting that only one upstairs window remained lit. Suddenly, a strange smell drifted on the wind. Ethan frowned, sniffing the air, trying to place it. It was sharp and acrid, like burning plastic. Inside the mansion, completely oblivious to the creeping danger, Lily had finally drifted off to sleep. It was a soft crackling sound that first woke her. Lily opened her eyes, disoriented. A peculiar odor now filled the room, and she could see a thin, gray haze gathering near the ceiling. "Martha?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer. A cold knot of fear began to form in her chest as she noticed an ominous orange glow emanating from beneath her bedroom door. The crackling grew louder, punctuated by sharp pops and groans. Lily leaped from her bed and ran to the door. As her hand touched the brass knob, she cried out and snatched it back. The metal was scalding hot. "Daddy!" she screamed, tears now streaming down her face. "Martha! Somebody! Please!" The fire, sparked by old faulty wiring in the mansion's walls, was now spreading with voracious speed across the second floor. Flames licked at the antique wallpaper and devoured the plush carpets. Lily scrambled to the window, coughing as the smoke grew thicker. She could see the reflection of the flames in the glass, a monstrous advancing wall of destruction. "Help!" she shrieked, her voice thin and hoarse. "Please, somebody help me!" Outside, Ethan froze as he heard her faint cry. His eyes widened in horror at the sight of black smoke pouring from the mansion. The flames were now clearly visible, consuming the second-floor windows. "Buddy, come on!" he yelled, breaking into a dead sprint toward the burning house. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to stay out of trouble. But something deeper, something more powerful, pushed him forward. The image of the lonely little girl he had watched from afar flashed in his mind. As he ran, the terrifying memories of his own past flooded his thoughts. The fire that had consumed their small apartment, his mother's frightened eyes, the suffocating heat, the absolute desperation. Ethan shook his head violently, forcing the memories away. There was no time. Someone needed help, and he was the only one there. As he neared the mansion, the heat from the blaze hit him like a physical blow. The flames had now engulfed nearly the entire second floor, and he could hear the sickening sounds of splintering wood and shattering glass. And then he saw her. Framed against the smoke and fire, Lily's pale, terrified face appeared in the second-floor window. Their eyes locked for a heart-stopping moment, her terror momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of hope. Ethan frantically scanned the exterior of the house, searching for a way to reach her. His eyes landed on a thick, ancient vine that snaked its way up the stone wall, reaching almost to Lily's window. Without a second's hesitation, Ethan began to climb. The heat was immense, the smoke searing his lungs, but he kept going, driven by a force he didn't understand. "Hang on," he yelled up to Lily. "I'm coming to help you." As Ethan scaled the wall, braving the heat and the ever-present danger, Lily clung to the windowsill, her eyes fixed on the small, determined figure ascending toward her. In that terrifying moment, two lonely lives were about to be woven together in a way neither could have ever imagined, as the quiet night roared with the flames of a fate that would forever change the lives of a brave, homeless boy and a lonely, wealthy girl. The roar of the flames was a deafening beast, punctuated by Lily's desperate cries. Ethan, his heart a frantic drum in his chest, stared at the burning mansion and then glanced at the dark road leading to safety. For a split second, his survival instincts shrieked at him, "Run! Save yourself!" But then another cry, weaker this time, sliced through the night. "Help! Help! Please!" Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, his hands balling into tight fists. His mother's words echoed in the chambers of his memory. "Always help those in need, Ethan. That's what makes us human." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Ethan opened his eyes, a new, steely determination shining in them. "Let's go, buddy," he muttered to the dog, who barked once in affirmation. "We have to help." Ethan sprinted toward the mansion, the heat intensifying with each stride. His eyes desperately scanned the building's facade, searching for an entry point. The ancient vine he'd spotted earlier seemed to be his only chance. Without hesitation, he launched himself onto it, his calloused hands gripping the gnarled branches as his bare feet found purchase on the rough stone wall. The heat was a physical presence, and the thick smoke made it nearly impossible to see, but he kept climbing, fueled by a desperate urgency. Below, Buddy barked nonstop, as if shouting encouragement to his young master. At last, Ethan reached the second-floor window. The glass was hot, but not yet hot enough to cause a serious burn. With a grunt of effort, he managed to slide it open and scramble into the burning room. The smoke was a thick, choking blanket, forcing him to drop to his hands and knees to find cleaner air. "Lily!" he called out, his voice raw from a fit of coughing. "Where are you?" A weak moan guided him to a corner of the room. There, huddled and nearly unconscious, was Lily. Her golden hair was streaked with soot, her breathing shallow and ragged. Ethan rushed to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lily, can you hear me? I've come to help." Lily's eyes fluttered open, wide with fear and confusion. Who are you?" she whispered between coughs. "I'm Ethan. I'm getting you out of here, okay? Trust me." Without waiting for a reply, Ethan scooped Lily into his arms. Despite his own slight build, years of fending for himself on the streets had given him a surprising, wiry strength. Holding Lily securely, Ethan turned toward the door, only to see it completely engulfed in a wall of flame. Panic threatened to seize him, but he shoved it down, forcing his mind to work. "The window," he muttered. "We have to go back down the way I came." Carrying Lily, Ethan made his way back to the window. The new challenge was to descend the vine with only one free hand. He knew it was incredibly dangerous, but there was no other way. "Lily, I need you to hold on to me as tight as you can, okay?" Ethan instructed, carefully maneuvering the girl onto his back. Lily, only semi-conscious, nodded weakly and wrapped her small arms around his neck. With one last glance at the inferno behind them, Ethan began the treacherous descent. Every movement was a calculated risk, every foothold tested before he committed his weight. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with the soot and grime. Halfway down, a faint voice whispered in his ear. "I'm scared." "Me too," Ethan admitted softly. "But we'll make it. I promise." As they neared the ground, a loud, splintering crash echoed from above. Ethan looked up to see a section of the roof collapsing, sending a shower of sparks and flaming debris raining down toward them. "Hold on tight," he yelled, quickening his pace. They were only a few feet from the ground when Ethan's foot slipped on a loose piece of stone. For one heart-stopping moment, they were in free fall. Ethan instinctively twisted his body in midair, positioning himself to take the brunt of the impact. They hit the ground hard, the force knocking the wind out of him, but Lily was safe, cushioned by his own body. Gasping for air, Ethan struggled to his feet, still cradling Lily. Buddy ran to them, barking anxiously. "We're not safe yet," Ethan panted. "We need to get farther away." As Ethan carried Lily across the manicured lawn, away from the roaring blaze, he could hear the distant wail of sirens. Help was on the way, but the danger wasn't over. Suddenly, another explosion rocked the night, and Ethan felt a searing pain in his leg as a piece of burning debris struck him. Gritting his teeth, he pushed onward. Almost there, he encouraged Lily, who was beginning to stir in his arms. At last, they reached the edge of the property. Ethan gently laid Lily down on the cool grass before collapsing beside her. Buddy whimpered, licking Ethan's face with frantic concern. Lily's eyes blinked open, slowly focusing on Ethan's soot-streaked face. You saved me," she whispered. Ethan managed a weak smile. "I couldn't leave you behind." As the sirens grew deafeningly loud, Ethan's vision started to swim. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Lily's small hand reaching out for his, a gesture of gratitude and connection that transcended their vastly different worlds. In that moment, as the fire greedily consumed the symbols of wealth and status behind them, two lonely children found an unexpected and powerful bond. Ethan, the resourceful orphan from the streets, and Lily, the isolated heiress, lay side by side on the grass, their destinies now irrevocably intertwined by an extraordinary act of courage. The night sky above them was a terrifying canvas of orange and red, but amidst the chaos and destruction, a tiny spark of hope had been ignited, one that would forever alter both of their lives. When the first responders arrived, they found an improbable trio: a young boy in ragged, smoking clothes, a small girl in silk pajamas, her golden hair stained with soot, and a loyal dog standing guard over them both. It was an image that would remain with them for years, a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the boundless compassion of a child. The heat was a suffocating monster, the flames a menacing dance all around them. Ethan, with an unconscious Lily in his arms, looked around frantically for an escape route, his heart feeling as though it would hammer its way out of his chest. Without a second thought, Ethan shrugged off his tattered jacket and wrapped it around Lily. It was a meager shield against the inferno, but it was all he had. "It's going to be okay," he muttered, more to himself than to the limp form in his arms. "We'll get out of here." Outside, Buddy's frantic barks were a steady rhythm in the chaotic night. Ethan edged toward a window, trying to see his faithful friend through the billowing smoke. He spotted Buddy running back and forth, barking insistently toward one corner of the house. "Good boy, Buddy," Ethan yelled, his voice hoarse. "We're coming." Guided by the sound of Buddy's barks, Ethan moved cautiously through the burning corridors. The floorboards groaned ominously under his feet, and he could feel the intense heat radiating through the thin soles of his worn-out sneakers. Finally, he reached a window at the far end of a hallway. Looking down, he saw the ancient vine snaking its way to the ground. It was their only way out. With Lily clutched tightly in one arm, Ethan forced the window open. A blast of fresh air hit him, a momentary reprieve from the suffocating smoke, but there was no time to waste. "Hold on tight, Lily," he whispered, positioning the girl on his back. Even in her unconscious state, her arms instinctively tightened around his neck. With a final grim look at the hellscape behind him, Ethan began the perilous descent. Each movement was a test of his strength and balance. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, and a paralyzing fear gnawed at him with every step. "Don't look down," he repeated to himself like a mantra. "Just one step at a time." Halfway down, a sharp crack from above made his heart leap into his throat. He glanced up to see a section of the roof caving in, sending a torrent of fiery debris cascading down. "No, no, no," he shouted, scrambling faster. Pieces of flaming wood rained down all around him, some missing by mere inches. The fear was all-consuming now. His hands trembled, and his feet slipped. For a terrifying instant, he thought they were going to fall. But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "You are stronger than you think, my son. Never give up." With a guttural cry of pure determination, Ethan found a reserve of strength he never knew he possessed. Ignoring the pain and the sheer exhaustion, he continued his descent, inch by agonizing inch. When his feet finally touched solid ground, Ethan almost collapsed with relief, but he knew he couldn't rest. The wail of sirens was growing closer. Buddy ran to him, barking and jumping with joy. Ethan managed a faint smile for his loyal friend, grateful for his unwavering presence. "Come on, boy," he said, starting to move away from the burning mansion. "We need to get Lily to safety." But every step was a battle. Exhaustion weighed on him like a lead cloak. His vision began to blur at the edges, and he could feel his strength failing. That was when the first fire truck screeched to a halt, their emergency lights painting the night in frantic flashes of red and white. Paramedics leaped from the vehicles, racing toward the inferno. Ethan hesitated. His street-honed instincts screamed at him to run, to melt back into the shadows as he always did. But Lily needed urgent medical attention. With a heavy heart, Ethan stumbled toward the paramedics. "Over here!" he yelled, his voice a raw, weak croak. "She needs help." The paramedics rushed over, immediately taking Lily from Ethan's trembling arms. "Good job, kid," one of them said, placing a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You saved her life." Dazed, Ethan watched as they carried Lily to the ambulance. A part of him wanted to follow to make sure she would be okay. But another part, the part that had kept him alive on the streets for so long, knew it was time to disappear. Seizing the opportunity in the chaos, firefighters battling the blaze, paramedics tending to Lily, Ethan began to quietly back away. Buddy, sensing his young master's intent, followed in silence. But before they could vanish completely, Ethan stopped and took one last look back. The image of the burning mansion, the flashing lights, and the small, still form of Lily being treated in the ambulance would be forever seared into his memory. "Goodbye, Lily," he whispered. "I hope you'll be okay." With those words, Ethan and Buddy melted into the darkness of the night, leaving behind the chaos and destruction. The homeless boy who had become an unlikely hero moved on, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. As they made their escape, Ethan felt a storm of emotions: relief at having survived, pride in saving Lily, but also a pang of deep sadness. For a brief time, he had felt a sense of purpose, something greater than his daily struggle for existence. Exhausted and covered in soot, Ethan finally stumbled back to his refuge in the old barn. Lying down in the hay with Buddy curled up beside him, he finally allowed the overwhelming fatigue to claim him. Before he drifted off, Ethan glanced up at the stars visible through the cracks in the roof. "Mom," he whispered, "I hope you're proud of me." And with that thought, the little hero fell into a profound sleep, oblivious to how his single act of courage had just irrevocably altered the course of so many lives. The shriek of the ambulance siren sliced through the night as Lily was rushed to the hospital. A team of paramedics worked feverishly, monitoring her vital signs and administering oxygen to ease her labored breathing. Not far behind, in a second ambulance, lay Ethan. The young hero had collapsed shortly after handing Lily over to the medics, finally succumbing to the overwhelming effects of exhaustion and smoke inhalation. The paramedics, deeply impressed by the boy's bravery, treated him with the same level of care and urgency. At the hospital, the emergency room staff was on high alert, ready to receive the victims of the fire. As the ambulance doors flew open, a flurry of doctors and nurses whisked Lily and Ethan away to separate treatment bays. Meanwhile, John Smith received the phone call that is every parent's worst nightmare. His face drained of all color as he heard the words, "fire" and "Lily." Without a second's thought, he bolted from his meeting, ignoring the bewildered protests of his business associates. The drive to the hospital was an eternity for John. His mind reeled with horrifying possibilities, and a bitter, crushing guilt settled over him for not being at home. "Please, God," he murmured over and over, "protect my daughter." Arriving at the hospital, John sprinted to the reception desk, his usually immaculate and composed demeanor completely shattered. "Lily Smith," he gasped. "My daughter, where is she?" The receptionist, recognizing the raw panic in his eyes, quickly directed him to the pediatric emergency wing. John ran through the sterile corridors, his heart hammering against his ribs. Finally, he saw a doctor stepping out of one of the rooms. "Doctor," he called out, "Lily Smith, how is she?" The doctor turned, his expression serious but calm. "Mr. Smith, your daughter is stable. She suffered from significant smoke inhalation and had an asthma attack, but she got here just in time. We're treating her with oxygen and medication. She's going to be okay." John felt his legs threaten to give out from under him. He leaned against the cool wall, tears of profound relief shining in his eyes. "Can I see her?" "Soon," the doctor assured him. "We're just finishing some tests. But there's something else you need to know, Mr. Smith." John looked up, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over him. "What is it?" "Your daughter wasn't brought in alone. She was rescued by a young boy who risked his own life to save her." Surprise registered on John's face. "A boy? Who?" "We don't know much about him," the doctor explained. "He appears to be homeless. He's being treated in another room. He also inhaled a lot of smoke and is suffering from exhaustion." John stood in silence for a moment, the information struggling to compute. A homeless boy had saved his precious Lily. It felt utterly surreal. "May I see him?" John asked, the request surprising even himself. The doctor nodded and guided John to another treatment room. As he entered, John felt his heart clench. There, lying in the bed, looking impossibly small and fragile under the harsh hospital lights, was Ethan. The boy was unconscious, an oxygen tube taped to his nose, monitors beeping a soft, steady rhythm beside him. His skin was streaked with soot, and John could see angry red burns on his arms and hands. "My God," John murmured, stepping closer to the bed. "He's so young." A nurse, checking Ethan's vitals, glanced at John with a gentle smile. "He's a real hero," she said quietly. "The paramedics said he carried your daughter out of the burning house. He could barely stand when they arrived, but his only concern was for her." A tidal wave of emotion crashed over John, gratitude, admiration, and a profound, aching sadness. He looked at the frail boy in the bed, trying to comprehend the sheer courage it must have taken. "Will he be okay?" John asked, his voice thick. The nurse nodded. "Yes, he's strong. He'll need a few days to fully recover, but he'll be fine." Just then, Ethan began to stir, his eyelids fluttering. John moved closer, watching intently as the boy struggled back to consciousness. Ethan's eyes finally opened, filled with confusion and disorientation. He looked around wildly, panic rising in his gaze until his eyes landed on John. "Lily," Ethan managed, his voice a dry rasp. "Is she—" "She's fine," John said quickly, gently placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Thanks to you. You saved her life." Ethan visibly relaxed, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they held a mixture of relief and wary apprehension. John felt an immediate, powerful connection to the boy. Ethan's genuine concern for Lily, even in his own weakened state, touched something deep inside him. "What's your name?" John asked softly. "Ethan," the boy answered hesitantly. "Ethan," John repeated, a genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time that night. "I'm John, Lily's father, and I have no words to thank you for what you did." Ethan looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same," he murmured. "No, Ethan," John said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. You are a hero." The words seemed to strike a chord in Ethan, and John saw tears welling up in the boy's eyes. On impulse, John reached out and gently took Ethan's hand. In that moment, an unbreakable bond formed between the powerful businessman and the homeless boy. John felt a surge of protectiveness and gratitude he had never experienced before, not even for his own daughter. "Rest now, Ethan," John said softly. "You're safe here, and I promise I'll take care of you." As Ethan drifted back to sleep, exhausted but at peace, John remained by his side, his mind racing with thoughts of the future and the profound changes this night was destined to bring for them all. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of Ethan's hospital room, casting a soft glow on the sleeping boy. John entered quietly, a cup of coffee in hand, his face etched with the fatigue of a sleepless night spent shuttling between Lily's room and Ethan's. Sinking into the chair beside the bed, John studied the boy. In the daylight, Ethan's vulnerability was even more stark. His ragged clothes had been replaced with a standard-issue hospital gown which seemed to swallow his small frame. Ethan began to stir, his eyes blinking slowly until they focused on John. For a moment, confusion clouded his features before recognition dawned. "Good morning, Ethan," John said softly. "How are you feeling?" Ethan pushed himself into a sitting position, clearly uneasy with the attention. "I'm okay," he replied, his voice still raspy. "How's Lily?" John smiled, touched by the boy's unwavering concern. "She's doing much better thanks to you. In fact, she won't stop asking about her savior." A faint blush crept up Ethan's neck, and he looked away. John leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Ethan, what you did was incredible. You risked your own life to save my daughter. I can never thank you enough." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do," he mumbled. John shook his head. "No, Ethan. What you did was extraordinary, and I want to reward you for it." He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket, and Ethan's eyes widened. "Name your price. Anything you want. A new house, clothes, toys, whatever you wish." An unnerving silence stretched between them. Ethan stared at the checkbook, a fierce internal battle raging in his eyes. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I don't need money, sir." John frowned, confused. "But surely there's something you want, something I can do for you." Ethan hesitated, biting his lower lip. Then, as if summoning all his courage, he looked John directly in the eye. "My dog, Buddy. He's sick. If you could help him?" John was stunned. Of all the things he had expected the boy to ask for, this wasn't one of them. This child, who had nothing, was turning down a potential fortune to help his sick dog. "Your dog?" John repeated, incredulous. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "He's my only friend. He's been coughing a lot lately, and he won't eat. I don't know what to do." In that instant, something fundamental shifted inside John Smith. The raw purity of Ethan's request struck him like a physical blow. Here was a boy who had risked everything for a stranger, and his only request was for the well-being of his dog. A wave of shame washed over John. How many times had he placated Lily with material things instead of addressing her emotional needs? How often had he measured worth in dollars and cents? "Ethan," John said, his voice thick with emotion, "of course we'll help Buddy. I promise you, he'll get the best veterinary care available." Ethan's face lit up with a brilliant, genuine smile, the first John had seen. "Really? Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you so much." On impulse, John reached out and ruffled Ethan's hair. "Don't thank me, kid. I should be thanking you." Just then, a nurse entered the room. "Mr. Smith, your daughter is asking for you, and she insists on seeing the boy hero." John glanced at Ethan, who looked both anxious and hopeful. "What do you say, Ethan? Feel up to a visitor?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "Yes, please." Minutes later, Lily was wheeled into the room. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw Ethan, and a radiant smile spread across her face. "It's you," she exclaimed. "You saved me." Ethan blushed again but smiled back. "Hey, Lily, I'm glad you're okay." The two children began to talk, Lily peppering Ethan with questions about the rescue, about his dog, about his life. John watched, amazed at the immediate and easy connection between them. As they chatted, John made an impulsive decision, one that felt more right than any business deal he'd ever closed. "Ethan," he said gently, interrupting their conversation, "I'd like to make you an offer. Once you and Lily are discharged from the hospital, I'd like for you to come stay with us for a while. We can take care of you and Buddy, give you a comfortable place to recover." The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan stared at John, his eyes a mixture of shock and deep-seated suspicion, clearly unable to process the offer. I don't know," Ethan began, but Lily cut him off. "Oh, please, Ethan, please come. We can play together, and I can show you all my toys, and we can take care of Buddy together." Lily's unbridled enthusiasm was infectious, and John saw a flicker of hope in Ethan's eyes. "You can trust us, Ethan," John said softly. "Let us give back just a small piece of what you did for our family." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ethan nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Thank you." In that moment, as Lily clapped her hands in delight and John felt a great weight lift from his shoulders, they all knew their lives had been irrevocably altered. A new, unlikely family was beginning to form, born from the ashes of a tragedy and united by the selfless courage of a boy from the streets. The quiet hum of John's luxury sedan was the only sound as they drove through the city. In the back seat, Buddy, Ethan's loyal companion, lay on the plush leather, his breathing shallow and his eyes weary. John glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression a mix of concern and resolve. "Don't worry, Buddy," he murmured, more to himself than to the dog. "We'll get you taken care of." He pulled up to the city's most renowned veterinary clinic, where he carefully carried Buddy inside. The head veterinarian, Dr. Adams, saw them immediately, having been alerted to the urgency of the situation. While Buddy was being examined, John couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, alone back at the hospital. The boy had been visibly distressed at being separated from his dog, but John's solemn promise to personally oversee Buddy's care had finally reassured him. "Mr. Smith," Dr. Adams's voice brought John back to the present. "Buddy has a severe case of pneumonia, likely from malnutrition and exposure. But with the right treatment, he should make a full recovery." John let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Do whatever it takes, Doctor. Cost is no object." Back at the hospital, John walked in on a scene that warmed his heart. Lily, still in her wheelchair, was parked beside Ethan's bed. They were talking animatedly, laughing like they had been friends for years. "Daddy!" Lily exclaimed when she saw him. "Ethan was telling me about his adventures in the old barn. Can we have a barn too?" John chuckled, ruffling his daughter's hair. "We'll see, Princess." He turned to Ethan and smiled. "I have good news about Buddy. He's going to be just fine." The relief that washed over Ethan's face was palpable. "Thank you, Mr. Smith. I don't know how to thank you." At that moment, Dr. Evans, Ethan's physician, entered the room, his face serious. "Mr. Smith, may I have a word with you in private?" In the hallway, the doctor was direct. "Mr. Smith, we're very concerned about Ethan's condition. Beyond the injuries from the fire, he's showing signs of severe malnutrition and what looks like past neglect. He has virtually no medical history. This boy needs consistent care and a stable environment." John's heart tightened. The image of the brave boy who had saved his daughter living on the streets, hungry and cold, was unbearable. "Doctor," John said firmly, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Ethan gets the care he needs. He will not be going back to the streets." Returning to the room, John watched Ethan and Lily chatting, lost in their own world. His mind was already made up, but he knew he had to tread carefully. "Ethan," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed, "remember my invitation for you to stay with us for a while?" Ethan nodded, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Well, I'd like to amend that invitation, not just for a few weeks, but for as long as you want." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotion. Ethan stared at John, his eyes a turbulent mix of hope and fear. "But why?" Ethan finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. John took a deep breath. "Because you deserve a home, Ethan, a safe place with warm meals, a comfortable bed, and people who care about you. And because I care about you." Lily, who had been listening intently, suddenly clapped her hands. "Does that mean Ethan will be my brother?" The innocent question brought a lump to John's throat. "Only if he wants to be, Princess. Only if he wants to be." Ethan seemed to be wrestling with a lifetime of ingrained caution. The streets had taught him not to trust, not to hope. But the sincerity in John's eyes and the pure, uncomplicated joy on Lily's face were starting to melt his defenses. "Can I think about it?" he asked hesitantly. John nodded, understanding. "Of course, Ethan. Take all the time you need." In the following days, as Ethan and Lily recovered, John set things in motion. A room was prepared for Ethan in the mansion, new clothes were bought, and appointments with the best specialists were scheduled. One afternoon while visiting, John noticed the old, battered backpack in the corner of Ethan's room. It was the only possession Ethan had brought with him. "What's in there, Ethan?" John asked casually. Ethan glanced at the backpack, a protective, almost nostalgic look in his eyes. "They're just my things. Important things." John nodded, respecting the boy's privacy, but his curiosity was piqued. What treasures could that worn-out bag possibly hold? Finally, the day of discharge arrived. Ethan, still hesitant but looking visibly healthier, stood by his bed with the old backpack slung over his shoulder. "Ready?" John asked gently. Ethan looked at Lily, who was smiling encouragingly from her wheelchair, and then back at John. Slowly, he nodded. "Yes," he said softly, "I'm ready." As they left the hospital, stepping toward a new life for Ethan and continued recovery for Lily, John felt a profound sense that this was the beginning of an incredible journey, a journey of healing, not just for the two children, but for himself as well. With Buddy waiting for them at home, recovered and eager to see his young master, the new and unlikely family set off together toward a future that was suddenly full of promise. The imposing iron gates of the Smith estate swung open, revealing a world Ethan had only ever seen from a distance. His eyes, wide with awe, took in the meticulously landscaped gardens, the ornate fountain, and the sheer scale of the mansion. Buddy, now healthy and energetic, barked excitedly beside him. "Welcome to your new home, Ethan," John said, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Ethan swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the strap of his old backpack. It's so big," he murmured, clearly overwhelmed. From the back seat of the car, Lily clapped her hands. "Come on, Ethan, I want to show you everything." Stepping inside the mansion, Ethan was enveloped by a world of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and antique furniture. It was a universe away from the drafty, abandoned barn. His bare feet felt hesitant and out of place on the gleaming marble floor. Martha, the housekeeper, greeted them with a warm, welcoming smile. "Welcome, Ethan. Your room is all ready for you." Following them up the grand staircase, Ethan was shown to a bedroom larger than any space he had ever inhabited. It had a king-sized bed, a large flat-screen television, and a wardrobe filled with new clothes. "Is all this for me?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. John nodded, smiling. "All yours, Ethan. I hope you'll be comfortable." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too silent. He found himself staring out the massive window, a strange part of him longing for the familiar discomforts of the barn. Buddy, sensing his master's unease, hopped onto the bed and curled up beside him, a warm, reassuring presence. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments. Ethan struggled to adapt to scheduled meals, hesitated before using the luxurious bathroom, and felt like an imposter in the new, expensive clothes. Lily, however, blossomed in the presence of her new friend. Her health visibly improved, and her laughter, a sound long absent, now echoed through the mansion's halls. She eagerly dragged Ethan all over the estate, showing him her toys and her favorite hiding spots. Watching the remarkable transformation in his daughter, John began to reevaluate his own life. He started canceling business trips, delegating more responsibilities, and spending more time at home. Evenings, once silent and solitary, were now filled with board games, story times, and lively dinner conversations. But it wasn't a seamless transition. Some of the mansion staff viewed Ethan with suspicion. He was followed by whispers and sideways glances. One day, Ethan overheard two maids talking. "Have you seen the way he eats? Like he's afraid the food will run away? And that filthy old backpack? I bet it's full of things he's stolen." Shame and anger burned in Ethan's cheeks. He fled back to his room, clutching his precious backpack. For a fleeting moment, he considered running away, back to the streets where at least he knew the rules. It was Lily who found him, huddled in a corner, hugging his backpack. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Ethan hesitated, but something in Lily's earnest expression made him open up. He told her about the maid's comments, about how he felt like he didn't belong. Lily listened intently, tears welling in her eyes. Without a word, she sat down beside him and gave him a fierce hug. "You're my hero, Ethan," she whispered. "Don't you let anyone make you feel like you're not." That night at dinner, Lily stunned everyone by confronting the adults about how Ethan was being treated. "Ethan saved my life," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. "He deserves to be here just as much as any of us." John, shocked by the revelation, took immediate action. He called a meeting with the entire staff, making it unequivocally clear that Ethan was now a part of the family and was to be treated with the utmost respect. Gradually, things began to change. Bolstered by the unwavering support of John and Lily, Ethan started to come out of his shell. He shared stories of his life on the streets, taught Lily some of the survival skills he had learned, and slowly, cautiously, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he truly belonged. His old backpack, however, remained a closely guarded mystery. He never let it out of his sight, and both John and Lily, though curious, respected his privacy. One afternoon, while they were playing in the garden, Lily had a sudden asthma attack. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan sprinted inside and returned with her inhaler, which she had forgotten in her room. "How did you know where it was?" John asked later, impressed. Ethan shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I pay attention. On the streets, watching and remembering can save your life." In that moment, John felt the full weight of what Ethan had endured and was humbled by his resilience. As the weeks turned into months, Lily's health continued to improve dramatically. Her complexion grew brighter, her energy levels soared, and her asthma attacks became less frequent. Her doctors were astounded by her progress. "It's because of Ethan," Lily declared during one checkup. "He makes me want to be stronger." Hearing this, Ethan felt a warm, comforting feeling spread through his chest. For the first time in a very long time, he allowed himself to think that he might have finally found a real home. That night, as he got ready for bed, Ethan looked at his old backpack and let out a soft sigh. He opened it and pulled out the small, worn book his mother had given him. "Maybe," he thought, "one day I can share this with them." And with that thought, Ethan fell asleep, Buddy curled at his feet, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. The full moon hung high over the Smith estate, casting long, restless shadows through the mansion's silent corridors. In Ethan's room, a different kind of storm was brewing, a tempest of long-suppressed memories, and fears. Ethan tossed and turned in his bed, ensnared in a recurring nightmare. In his dream, he was back in the small apartment he had shared with his mother. The acrid smell of smoke filled his nostrils, and flames danced menacingly along the walls. "Mom!" he shouted desperately, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of the fire. The intense heat, the paralyzing fear, it all felt terrifyingly real. Ethan awoke with a start, his heart hammering against his ribs. His wide eyes darted around the room, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious surroundings that still felt so foreign. Buddy, sensing his master's distress, nudged closer, offering a comforting, silent presence. The boy buried his face in the dog's soft fur, trying to calm his ragged breathing. Across the hall, John, on his usual nightly check of the children, heard the muffled sounds coming from Ethan's room. Concerned, he approached the door and knocked softly. "Ethan, are you all right in there?" A moment of silence passed before Ethan's trembling voice replied, "Yes, Mr. Smith, I'm fine. Just a bad dream." John hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. Part of him wanted to go in and comfort the boy, but he also wanted to respect Ethan's privacy. "If you need anything, I'm right here, okay?" "Thank you," came the soft, almost inaudible reply. The next morning at breakfast, John watched Ethan closely. The boy looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes standing out starkly against his pale skin. But it wasn't just the fatigue that caught John's attention. There was something in the way Ethan held his cup, in the slight tilt of his head when he was thinking, that felt strangely familiar, like an echo of someone from his past. "Ethan," John began casually, trying not to sound too intrusive, "do you remember anything about your parents? About your life before you came here?" Ethan's fork paused midway to his mouth. His eyes flickered to John's before dropping to his plate. "Not much," he mumbled, pushing his food around. "Just my mom. A little." Lily, ever sensitive to the emotional undercurrents in a room, sensed the tension. "Ethan," she interjected brightly, "let's go play in the garden after breakfast. Buddy looks like he wants to run." Grateful for the diversion, Ethan nodded enthusiastically. The subject was dropped, but John's curiosity was far from satisfied. Later that day, Martha, the housekeeper, was tidying Ethan's room when she noticed the old backpack tucked carefully under the bed. Intrigued by the boy's fierce protectiveness of it, she picked it up, surprised by its weight. Something inside felt solid, like a book or a small box. Before she could investigate further, the sound of hurried footsteps alerted her. Ethan burst into the room, his eyes immediately locking onto the backpack in Martha's hands. Panic was stark on his face. "Please," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Don't touch that. It's really important to me." Martha, realizing how precious the item was, gently placed the backpack back where she found it. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean to pry. I was just tidying up." Ethan relaxed a fraction, but his gaze never left the backpack until Martha had left the room. As soon as the door closed, he rushed over to ensure its contents were undisturbed. In the garden, Lily watched Ethan playing with Buddy. She noticed how, every so often, her friend would seem to drift away, a shadow of sadness passing over his features. It was a stark contrast to the moments of pure joy when he would laugh and run with the dog. "Ethan," she asked softly, approaching him, "why do you get sad sometimes? Aren't you happy here with us?" The question caught Ethan by surprise. He looked at Lily, touched by her perceptiveness. For a moment, he considered telling her everything, about his mother, the fire, his lonely life on the streets. But the fear of losing this newfound happiness, this fragile sense of belonging, made him hesitate. "I am happy, Lily. Very happy," he reassured her, forcing a smile. "Sometimes I just miss things from before." Lily frowned, not entirely convinced, but she sensed it was best not to push. Instead, she took his hand. "Well, whenever you feel sad, just remember you have me and Daddy now. And Buddy, of course." That evening, John decided to try again. He found Ethan in the library, engrossed in an old adventure novel. "That used to be my favorite book when I was your age," John commented, sitting down beside the boy. "Jim Hawkins's adventures always made me dream of hidden treasures and mysterious islands." Ethan smiled shyly. "It's really exciting. I like how Jim is brave, even when he's scared." John saw his opening. "You remind me a bit of Jim, you know, brave and resilient. You must have had many of your own adventures before you came here." Ethan's smile faded. John, noticing the change, continued gently. "Ethan, I know it must be difficult to talk about your past, but I want you to know that you can trust us. Nothing you could ever tell us would change the fact that you are part of this family now." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes, and he fought to keep them from falling. A part of him desperately wanted to confide, to share the heavy burden he carried. But another part, the part that had kept him alive on the streets, screamed at him to keep his secrets locked away. I can't," he finally whispered, closing the book and standing up abruptly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. Good night." John watched the boy hurry from the room, a mixture of frustration and concern churning inside him. What could possibly be so terrible that Ethan was too afraid to share it? In the days that followed, Ethan felt the weight of his secret more than ever. He saw the worry in John's eyes, the curiosity in Lily's, and even the puzzled glances from Martha. He felt like he was failing the very people who had welcomed him with open arms. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't go on like this. The fear of his past being exposed, of losing everything, was too much to bear. Silently, he grabbed his precious backpack and began to stuff a few items of clothing inside. His plan was simple: leave before sunrise and return to the streets, where no one asked questions, where his secrets would be safe. With a heavy heart, Ethan opened his bedroom door, ready to leave behind the comfort and affection he had known for the past few months. But as he stepped into the hallway, a soft voice stopped him cold. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Turning slowly, Ethan found himself face to face with Lily, who was standing in her doorway, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. In that instant, looking at the worried face of the girl who considered him her hero, Ethan felt all his resolve crumble. The tears he had been fighting for so long finally broke free. I can't stay, Lily," he sobbed. "There are things about me, about my past." Lily stepped closer and took his hand, her grip firm. "It doesn't matter what they are, Ethan. You're my friend. You're my hero. Nothing will ever change that." The simple, heartfelt words struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning. All the fears and doubts he had harbored for so long seemed to shrink in the face of this little girl's unwavering trust. "Okay," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "I'll stay, and I'll tell you everything." Lily hugged him tightly, relieved. "Let's go wake up Daddy. He'll want to hear too." Hand in hand, they walked toward John's bedroom. Ethan felt a mixture of terror and relief. He had no idea how John would react to the truth, but he knew he couldn't carry this burden alone any longer. With his hand on the handle of John's door, Ethan took a deep breath. It was time to face his past, and in doing so, perhaps finally find a real future with the family that had taken him in. The storm outside raged, lightning illuminating the night sky in dramatic flashes. Inside Ethan's room, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one of long-suppressed memories and fears. He tossed and turned, caught in the most vivid nightmare yet. He was back on that awful day of the fire, the choking heat and thick smoke obscuring his vision, his mother's desperate screams echoing in his ears. "Ethan, the letter? Remember the letter?" The boy woke with a strangled cry, bolting upright in bed, his heart pounding wildly. Tears streamed down his face as he struggled to separate dream from reality. The bedroom door flew open, revealing a frantic John, who had heard Ethan's scream and rushed to his side. "Ethan, are you all right?" John asked, moving cautiously closer. Disoriented and terrified, Ethan couldn't hold back the sobs that racked his small body. John, driven by a powerful paternal instinct, sat on the edge of the bed and hesitantly pulled the boy into a comforting embrace. To his surprise, Ethan didn't pull away. Instead, he clung to John as if his life depended on it, letting the tears flow unabated. "Shh, it's all right now," John murmured, rubbing the boy's back. "You're safe here." Gradually, Ethan's sobs subsided. When he finally calmed down, he pulled back slightly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," he muttered, avoiding John's gaze. "There's nothing to be sorry for, Ethan," John replied gently. "We all have nightmares. Do you want to talk about it?" Ethan hesitated, biting his lower lip. His eyes roamed the room before finally landing on his old battered backpack. A look of resolve settled on his face. "Actually," he said slowly, "there's something I need to show you." John watched, intrigued, as Ethan retrieved the backpack and brought it back to the bed. The boy clutched it for a moment, as if summoning his courage. "This backpack," Ethan began, his voice trembling, "it's all I have left of my old life. Of my mom." With shaky hands, Ethan opened the backpack and pulled out a worn book, a few faded photographs, and finally, a sealed envelope. "My mom gave me this before the fire," Ethan explained, holding out the envelope. "She said it was really important, that I should give it to my uncle if anything ever happened to her." John's heart began to race. "Ethan," he asked gently, "what was your mother's name?" "Claire," Ethan answered, fresh tears welling in his eyes. "Claire Dubois." The world seemed to stop for John Smith. Claire Dubois. The name echoed in his mind, stirring long-buried memories. With trembling hands, he took the envelope Ethan offered. As he opened it, a photograph fell into his lap. In it, two young women were smiling at the camera. John instantly recognized one of them as his late wife, Mary. The other one, he whispered, his finger tracing the image reverently, is Claire. Ethan watched, confused and anxious, as John's eyes widened in shock while he read the letter. His expression shifted from disbelief to dawning realization, and finally to raw, profound emotion. When he finished, John looked at Ethan as if seeing him for the very first time, tears streaming freely down his face. "Ethan," he said, his voice breaking, "you're my nephew." Ethan froze, his mind reeling. "What?" he asked, barely able to believe what he was hearing. John took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. "Claire was Mary's younger sister, my wife's sister. They had a falling out many years ago, before you were born. I didn't even know Claire had a son." Memories flooded John's mind, hushed conversations with Mary, vague mentions of a strained relationship with her sister, the deep sadness in his wife's eyes whenever the subject came up. "Mary always wanted to reconcile," John continued, speaking more to himself than to Ethan. "But we could never find Claire. And then Mary got sick and—" His voice faltered, the emotion overwhelming him. Ethan, still trying to process the revelation, hesitantly approached John. "So, you're my uncle?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. John nodded, a trembling smile forming on his lips. "Yes, Ethan, I'm your uncle, and your family." In that moment, something inside Ethan broke. All the fears and doubts he had carried for so long dissolved in a torrent of emotion. With a sob, he threw himself into John's arms, and John held him tightly, both of them weeping openly. They stayed like that for a long time, uncle and nephew, finally reconnected after years of unwitting separation. When they finally pulled apart, John cupped Ethan's face in his hands, studying his features. "How did I not see it before?" he murmured. "You have Claire's eyes, and Mary's smile." Ethan smiled shyly, feeling truly seen for the first time in his life. "What happened, Ethan?" John asked gently. "How did you end up on the streets?" Taking a deep breath, Ethan knew it was time to share his full story. He spoke of the fire that had taken his mother's life, of being left alone and terrified, of wandering from town to town, always afraid of being caught and sent to an orphanage. John listened, his heart breaking with every word. A crushing guilt tore at him. If only he and Mary had searched harder, if only they had been more insistent on finding Claire. "I am so sorry, Ethan," he said when the boy had finished. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that alone. But now you have a home, a family." Ethan nodded, silent tears tracing paths through the soot on his cheeks. "I always wanted a family," he confessed. "I always wanted to belong somewhere." "And you do belong, Ethan," John assured him. "You belong here, with us, with Lily, with me. This is your home now, forever." At that moment, as if on cue, Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Daddy? Ethan? What's going on?" she asked, noticing their tear-streaked faces. John held out a hand, beckoning her to join them on the bed. "Come here, Princess. We have some wonderful news to share." As John gently explained the situation to Lily, Ethan watched, his heart filling with an emotion he could barely name: gratitude, joy, love. Understanding that Ethan was, in fact, her cousin, Lily let out a squeal of delight and launched herself at him with a big hug. "I knew you were special," she exclaimed. "Now you're really, really part of our family." Ethan laughed, hugging her back, feeling truly at home for the first time in his life. John watched them, his heart overflowing with love for these two children, his daughter and his newly discovered nephew. He knew there would be many details to sort out, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. Their family was finally complete. Outside, the storm had passed. The first rays of the rising sun were breaking through the clouds, as if nature itself was celebrating this long-overdue reunion. For Ethan, it was as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He no longer had to carry his secrets alone. He no longer had to run and hide. He was home. He had a family. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan looked to the future not with fear, but with boundless hope. John's world had been turned upside down, but it was a welcome disruption, one that filled a void in his heart he hadn't even known was there. As the newly reunited family embraced, laughing and crying all at once, John made a silent promise to Claire, to Mary, and to himself. He would care for Ethan as his own son, giving him all the love, security, and opportunity he so richly deserved. The future, once uncertain, now shone with endless possibilities, and together, as a family, they were ready to face it. The days following the revelation were filled with a quiet tension in the Smith mansion. John, deeply shaken by the discovery that Ethan was his nephew, secluded himself in his office. He spent hours poring over old family albums and rereading Claire's letter, trying to process the flood of guilt and regret. Ethan, meanwhile, misinterpreted John's withdrawal as rejection. The old familiar fear that he would be abandoned again began to creep back into his heart. Dejected, he started to quietly plan his escape, convinced that his presence was causing more pain than joy. Lily, ever perceptive, noticed the growing chasm between her father and her cousin. She saw the sadness in Ethan's eyes whenever John passed him in the hallway with a distracted nod, and she saw the immense weight her father seemed to be carrying. One gloomy afternoon, Lily decided she'd had enough. She marched to her father's office and, without knocking, pushed the door open. John looked up, startled. "Lily? What is it, sweetheart?" The little girl planted her hands on her hips, a stern expression on her young face. "Daddy, we need to talk about Ethan." John sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Lily, it's complicated." "No, it's not," she interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Ethan is family. He saved us, and now you're making him feel like we don't want him here." Lily's words struck John like a physical blow. He looked at his daughter and saw not just a little girl, but a reflection of Mary's fierce compassion and unwavering strength. "Oh, Lily," he muttered, pulling her into a hug. "You're right. I've really messed this up, haven't I?" Lily hugged him back, feeling his tears dampen her hair. "Not yet, Daddy. But you have to talk to Ethan. He thinks you don't want him." Her words were the wake-up call John desperately needed. He suddenly saw his own behavior through Ethan's eyes, the eyes of a boy who had already lost so much, who had finally found a home only to feel like he was being pushed away. "Where's Ethan now?" John asked, standing up abruptly. Lily's face paled. I saw him go to his room, with his old backpack. Dad, I think he's going to run away." Without another word, John raced out of his office, taking the stairs 2 at a time. His heart pounded in his chest, the fear of losing Ethan, of failing him as he felt he had failed Claire, propelling him forward. He burst into Ethan's room just in time to see the boy pushing open the window, the old backpack already slung over his shoulder. "Ethan!" John yelled, freezing the boy in his tracks. "Please, don't go." Ethan turned slowly, his eyes shining with tears. I thought you didn't want me here," he whispered. John crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled Ethan into a tight, desperate embrace. "Oh, Ethan, forgive me. I never, ever wanted you to feel that way. I was scared." Ethan, who had been tense at first, gradually relaxed in John's arms. "Scared? You?" John pulled back slightly, keeping his hands on Ethan's shoulders, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Scared I wouldn't be good enough for you, that I would fail you, just like I failed your mother." Ethan blinked in surprise. "But you didn't fail her? You didn't know." "Exactly," John nodded sadly. "I didn't know, and that haunts me. If I had just tried harder, if I had searched more for Claire, maybe you wouldn't have had to go through all of that." Ethan was silent for a moment, processing John's words. Then, to both their surprise, a small smile touched his lips. "You know, my mom used to say that we can't change the past, but we can choose our future." John's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "Your mother was a very wise woman," he said softly. "Ethan, I am so sorry I made you feel unwanted. Nothing could be further from the truth. You are family. You belong here with us." The tears Ethan had been holding back finally flowed freely. "I'm just so afraid," he confessed, "afraid that this is all too good to be true, that one day I'll wake up and it will all have been a dream." John pulled Ethan into another hug, his own voice thick with emotion. "It's not a dream, Ethan. It's real, and I promise you I will be here every single day to remind you of that. You will never be alone again." At that moment, Lily slipped quietly into the room. Seeing her dad and Ethan embracing, she ran over and wrapped her small arms around both of them. There, in that 3-way hug, something shifted. The final barriers crumbled. The fears began to recede. It wasn't a perfect family. There were still wounds to heal and trust to be rebuilt. But it was a start. A new chapter was being written, one filled with hope and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, all of them red-eyed but smiling, John ruffled Ethan's hair affectionately. "How about we start over?" he suggested. "No more secrets, no more fear. Just us. A family, facing the future together." Ethan looked from John to Lily and felt a sense of belonging so profound it almost took his breath away. With a genuine, radiant smile, he nodded. "I'd really like that," he answered. And so, on that sunny afternoon, a new journey began for the Smith family. A journey of healing, of love, and above all, of hope. In the months that followed, a remarkable transformation occurred within the Smith household. The once quiet and formal mansion now echoed with laughter and lively chatter. Ethan, gradually shedding his fear and distrust, blossomed under the love and care of his new family. John, in turn, rediscovered the joy of being a father. He spent more time at home, becoming an active and engaged parent in the lives of both Ethan and Lily. Evenings were filled with board games, reading aloud, and long talks about the past, present, and future. One bright summer morning, John woke with a smile. It was Ethan's birthday, and he had planned a special surprise. With Lily's enthusiastic assistance and the help of the entire household staff, he had organized a party to celebrate not only Ethan's birthday, but also a very important announcement. That afternoon, when Ethan came downstairs, he was greeted by a shower of confetti and a chorus of "Surprise!" His eyes widened at the sight of the room decked out in balloons and banners with a huge cake as the centerpiece. "Happy birthday, Ethan!" Lily shouted, running to hug her cousin. Overwhelmed, Ethan looked around, seeing not just his family, but also new friends he had made at school and in the neighborhood. Buddy, his loyal companion, barked happily at his side. John approached, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Happy birthday, son," he said warmly. "But we have more than just your birthday to celebrate today." Ethan looked at his uncle curiously. John signaled, and Martha, the housekeeper, brought over a large, ornate envelope. "Ethan," John began, his voice thick with emotion, "these past few months have been the happiest of my life since I lost Mary. You've brought so much light back into this house, into our lives, and today I want to make official what we all already feel in our hearts." He handed the envelope to Ethan, whose hands trembled as he opened it. His eyes scanned the legal document, growing wide with realization. This is," he stammered, hardly daring to believe it. John nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "Yes, Ethan. They're adoption papers. If you'll accept, you'll legally be my son." The room fell silent, everyone waiting anxiously for Ethan's response. The boy looked from the document to John, then to Lily, who was beaming encouragingly. I don't know what to say," Ethan finally managed, his voice shaking. "You've already given me so much. This family, it's the greatest gift I could have ever asked for." He threw his arms around John, sobbing with happiness. "Yes," he whispered, "yes, I want to be your son." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Lily joined the hug, forming a joyful, loving trio. When the initial wave of emotion subsided, John made another announcement. "To honor Claire's memory and to help other children like Ethan, we are establishing the Claire Dubois Foundation. We will work to get children off the streets and give them a chance at a better life." Ethan, his eyes still wet with tears, felt his heart swell with pride and gratitude. "Can I help?" he asked eagerly. "I want to make a difference for other kids like me." John smiled, full of pride. "Of course you can, son. In fact, we'll be counting on your experience to guide us." In the following months, Ethan became an active volunteer at the foundation. He shared his story with other homeless children, showing them that hope was real and that they, too, could find a home and a family. Ethan's old backpack, which had for so long carried his meager possessions and heavy memories, was given a place of honor in the mansion. John had a special glass case made for it, displaying it in the living room as a constant reminder of Ethan's incredible journey and the resilience that had brought him to them. One quiet autumn afternoon, the family gathered in the mansion's garden. Ethan, Lily, and John, each holding a small shovel, dug a hole in the lawn. "How about we plant this tree together?" John suggested, holding up a young oak sapling. "It can grow along with our family, a symbol of our new beginning." Together, they planted the tree, each tossing a handful of soil over its roots. As they worked, Ethan reflected on the incredible journey that had led him to this moment. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I was living on the streets, I used to dream about rewards, money, food, a warm place to sleep. But now I see that the real reward is this: family, love, a place to belong." Lily took Ethan's hand, smiling. "And we are so lucky to have you, Ethan. You've taught us so much about courage and strength." John, watching his children, felt his heart overflow with love and gratitude. "You two are my greatest reward," he said softly. "And together we'll build a bright future, not just for us, but for all the children we can help through the foundation." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, the Smith family embraced, bound not just by blood, but by something far stronger: love, understanding, and an unwavering determination to make a difference in the world. Ethan looked up at the sky, thinking of his mother. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for guiding me here." And so, beneath a sky painted in hues of orange and purple, with the promise of a new day shimmering on the horizon, the Smith family, John, Ethan, and Lily, faced the future together, their lives forever intertwined by an incredible journey of loss, discovery, and, above all, unconditional love.